Hello, dear ones. Father Peter John coming to you from All Saints Orthodox Church in Bloomington, Indiana. Christ is in our midst. You know, on April 1st, we celebrate a number of different things. In the church, we celebrate St. Mary of Egypt, a really big deal kind of a saint, especially during Great Lent. In the world, they celebrate April Fool's Day, okay? But, you know, there's a person who we celebrate on April 1st. Actually, we don't celebrate him very much because they kind of get the short end of the stick as far as celebrating is concerned. That person I'm thinking of is St. Euthemios of Suzdal, at which point you say, who? And that's exactly the point, right? Forgive me if there are any of you who know who he is and thinks that he's very well celebrated in your life, and that's great. But for the rest of us, we're missing out on somebody. And I want to tell you a little bit about him. First, let me tell you something that happened to me. When I came to Bloomington about almost 16 years ago to become the pastor of All Saints Orthodox Church, I was met at first with a little bit of hesitancy by some of the people who had been here for a while. And, you know, this went on for 2 or 3 weeks. And finally, you know, I was talking with somebody, and they said to me, well, you know, we don't want to get too close to you because, you know, it's just a matter of time before you go move to somewhere else. I was completely surprised by this, right? I had no idea that there was this kind of a sentiment. And so I told this to the bishop. I said, for some reason, some of the people here think that I'm going to be transferred again. And so the bishop paid a visit, and what did he do? He came up, and in front of the whole church, he said, Father Peter John's going to be here until the day he dies. I'm telling you, this is a good way to get your point across. Well, that was 3 bishops ago, and God knows how long I'll be here. My intention is to be here for a long, long time, but God knows. I don't know. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story actually relates to St. Euthemios of Suzdal, because when St. Euthemios became the founding abbot of the monastery of the Savior in Suzdal, it's amazing what happened, actually. He crafted for himself 3 different tombstones. So he crafted the first one, and apparently for emphasis, he crafted a second one, and then a third one. So he wanted to get the idea across to people that if they came to this monastery, that he was going to be there. He was not leaving. He was committed to being there until the day that he died, and that's actually what he said at the founding of the monastery. His speech was that he was going to stay there until the day he died, which he did. St. Euthemios, there's so much I could tell you about his life, but I won't, because I don't want this to be a 20-minute short video. But I will tell you just a couple of things. One was that he was extremely well learned, right? He was a very smart young man. He went to the monastery, and he became such a great ascetic that actually his spiritual father told him to dial it back a little bit. He said, you know, you're going to hurt yourself. You've got to dial it back. And so in obedience to his spiritual father, he did. But he was known as this great ascetic, this great man of prayer, this man who had this beautiful relationship and communion with Christ. And so when the time came to found a monastery in Suzdal, the brothers at the monastery of the caves where he lived decided unanimously that St. Euthemios should be the abbot of the monastery. So if that tells you anything about his reputation, just a phenomenal, beautiful Christian man. So he lived in the monastery. He attracted 300 monks, if you can think about that. Now, we hear stories that you know, of great monasteries like St. Sava's Monastery, where at one time, you know, that we're told in its greatest day there were 14,000 monks. And so we hear these huge numbers, and that sounds really impressive. And it is. I mean, that was St. Sava, right? St. Sava attracted these people. But for St. Euthemios to attract 300 monks to a new monastery in his own lifetime. Just think about that kind of a feat. I mean, think about what it means to become a monk. It means to dedicate yourself to a life of poverty, a life of abstinence, you know, a life of commitment only to Christ, not to be married, a life of prayer, you know, and fasting, and everything that goes with it, and to leave the world behind and to sacrifice yourself, your entire life, for the sake of Christ, and praying and living in the monastery serving the other brothers and serving those who come to you in need. So it's a big deal. So 300 monks he attracted. Finally, a number of years, I don't remember how many years, close to 100 years after he died, fell asleep in the Lord, should I say, they were building a new cathedral church at the monastery, and as they were digging the trench for the foundation, they came across his crypt, and when they opened his crypt, they found that his relics were completely incorrupt. So he looked as beautiful and plain as the day that he had fallen asleep in the Lord. Shortly thereafter, he was declared officially recognized as a saint in the Orthodox Church. So, St. Euthemius, pray unto God for us that we may have a fervor for Christ and a commitment to him that is unshakable. Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be.